Hello and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Paxton Fisher for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard army. It's really cool to see a Baneblade hitting the field of battle again. I'm sure many of you will agree, but I love the Baneblade. It's such a cool, iconic tank, and it's a shame that we don't see them more often. So thank you, Paxton, for sending some pictures in, because it's just great to see the old battle fortress rolling around and blowing up some of the supposed Emperor's finest, although we all know that the Guard is really the Emperor's finest of the Imperium. So thanks for these pictures in Paxton, absolutely fantastic. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want to use in my videos, then please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at morningglorytv@gmail.com. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So I go to a decent amount of tournaments. I'm not going to one every weekend, but a month rarely goes by without me battering my face against the wall that is the competitive meta. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for pain, but I just love taking my Guard to the events and just seeing how well I can do. Now, often I'll go sort of, this is not me tooting my own, often I'll go sort of 3-1-1 or 3-2. If I'm having a bit of a bad day, or if I'm trying out something a little bit more experimental, or perhaps I'm in a particularly shark tanky sort of tournament, then maybe I'll sort of go 2-1-2. But I seem to do quite well, and I managed to maintain about a 50% win rate. So why am I inflating my head so large that it can't fit through the door anymore? Well, what I want to do, guys, today is I want to share with you the competitive core to pretty much every single one of my lists. Now, these could be hybrid Guard lists, these could be mechanized Guard lists, they could be pretty much any sort of normal Guard list that you can think of. Hell, even armored Guard, this will have elements of this core. And so, unless you're running something that's a little bit out there, like Pure Infantry, and don't get me wrong, I love to run Pure Infantry, then what I want to talk about today is this competitive core. I want to share it with all of my fellow Guardsmen, and that way, hopefully, you guys can pick up some tips and maybe integrate this into your competitive core for any list that you're putting together as well. Now, when I'm talking about competitive core, what am I talking about? Do I mean like an apple core or something other crappy analogy that I can't think of right now? No, what I'm talking about is the units, the models that I will be putting into my army, and pretty much these are the first things that get committed to the pen and paper, because I'm kind of old school, I like doing it pen and paper, but if I feel like joining the 19th century, I might use like Battle Scribe or something like that. But the point is, these are the units that pretty much go into every list, and then I almost take it from there. Now, I'm sharing this with you because I found these units to be really, really effective. They help me win firefights, they help me take objectives, they help me deny enemy objectives or harass them. These units, I almost can't imagine building a list without them. So, without further ado, I've teased you enough. Let's go straight into it. What are the units? Why do I take them? And are there any variations or alternative options for these unit choices? So the first thing that pretty much goes into every list that I'm building is 3 tank commanders. And these are vitally important. I am dreading for when the new Guard Codex comes out and there's rumours that they're going to make it so like tank commanders don't hit on 3s anymore, or that tank commanders are limited to 1 per detachment. I am dreading that, because right now 3 tank commanders has just been the staple of pretty much every single list that I build that I'm trying to do well with. They're just such a crux for Guard at the moment. They're absolutely fantastic. Now, I know that some people are a little bit, tank commanders are quite expensive, but for me, they're just perfect. And now, why do I love tank commanders so much? Well, they bring one of the most important elements of any Guard list. They bring the pain. They bring the firepower. They bring the hurt for your opponent. Now, you wouldn't think there'd be such a huge difference between a regular Liam Russ with Mr. Skill 4+, and a tank commander with Mr. Skill 3+, but my god, it makes such a difference. It's almost, I mean, you can math hammer it as much as you want, but realistically, you cannot math hammer the difference enough to really understand how important it is on the tabletop. I have, and I'm sure, I know many other Guard commands out there, I have fired regular Liam and Russes turn after turn and just chipped a little bit of damage off here and there. I have fired tank commanders and deleted entire units. Deleted big things, deleted infantry, deleted just anything. Tank commanders are just so good. And it just comes down to the fact that they've got that extra ballistic skill, which means they're no longer screwed over by dense terrain or anything like that. And they have the ability to, even if they've moved, to be able to reroll ones and do other orders as well. I mean, I'm a big fan of, using the Cadian Regiment, and rolling out there and getting real random shots on my turrets. But if I'm using that doesn't have a random shot turret, although that's very, very rare, I've got loads of options. I've got Strike and Shroud. It allows me to go full throttle. There's so many things, but typically you're taking them. Really, if you just talk about the core of why we're taking them, they hit on 3s and they pretty much reroll 1s, and they've got loads of ways of determining how many random shots they're going to get and making sure that you get a high number. So they're just really, really powerful. Now, there are loads of different configurations that you can take for your tank commanders and for any Leman Russ, but right now, as we're recording this video, and pretty much since 8th edition through to right now, you want to be looking at the Demolisher Cannon. That is your go-to choice. It hits hard, it gets a decent number of shots, it's got good AP, it's just awesome. It only has one weakness, which is its short range, and that's it. That's its one weakness. It's not a weakness to be underestimated, but you're going to see how there's going to be other units in this core that kind of make up for that weakness. No enemy out there, I don't care how OP or how powerful they are, like to get hit by tank commanders. And with the fact they've got a 2+ save now, they're actually really, really durable. They don't feel as fragile as they used to. I'm still getting used to the fact that I can sort of be a bit more ballsy with my Leman Russes, because I was so used to them just getting picked up like there were no tomorrow, that the simple change of having that 2+ makes them really, really strong as well. So first core unit, tank commanders, preferably with Demolisher cannons. They just bring the pain. So that's the first part of the core, the firepower. The second part of the core is the infantry, and the infantry is just fantastic. And every time I'm saying core now, it's reminding me of that scene from Aliens where it's like, another day in the core. I love the core. Every day in the core is like a day on the farm. Every paycheck a fortune, every meal a banquet. So if you hear me say core a lot now, that's what's going through my head, is a poem just saying that line. Anyway, moving on. We're talking about the infantry. Now, infantry are really, really important, and I actually see a lot of people neglecting their infantry. I see a lot of people not taking enough infantry in their competitive list. If I'm building a competitive guard list, and we're talking about a core here, so this isn't going to be everything, we're talking about a core here, the minimum infantry that I will build into any core list is going to be 60. Now, some of you who have been watching my channel for a long time are going to be immediately bashing on the keyboard and saying, that's not true, you always say a minimum of 100, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, that's true. I do say a minimum of 100 if you're running like a hybrid list. But when we're talking about the core, you know, the first things that need to be going into your list, I'm talking about 60 infantry. And I'd be talking, you know, either a unit of conscripts and then the rest made up of infantry squads, or, you know, 6 units of infantry. It doesn't really matter. When I talk about infantry, it doesn't really matter. It can be conscripts, it can be guardsmen, it can be veterans. It doesn't really matter. The minimum you want to be taking is 60 warm bodies. And the reason for that is you need to be able to be playing the objective game. Be it secondary objectives. Now we've got like Nephilim around the corner, or there's loads of other secondary objectives that I'm sure they'll be changing every 6 months with GW, just keeping it fresh at the moment. But the point is, infantry play the objective game. They play secondaries, they play primaries. So they're really, really important for playing the objective game. You can kill as much as you want in 40k. And sometimes that will lead to victory. If you just smash your opponent to death, it will lead to victory. But in my experience, there are armies out there which do the whole killing thing better than Guard ever will do. I mean, let's look at Eldar, let's look at Tau. They just kill things and kind of worry about objectives later, but they fall apart if they don't kill things quick enough. Whereas Guard likes to do a lot of firepower, but we like to play the objective game. And infantry are really, really key to do that. They're also vitally important for screening out your firepower. You can have the best firepower in the world, but if your Leman Russ is tied up turn 1 because someone got some kind of turn 1 teleport or deep strike into your face, and then your tank just has to spend the whole game trying to flame or heavy bolter its way out of combat, that's not good. Even if you fall back, it's been denied for a turn of firepower, and you only get 5 turns in this game. So every time one of your tanks is locked up, it has lost 20% of its potential damage output for that game. That's the way to look at it. That's why I have such a fear, just an aversion to letting my tanks getting tied up. They don't want to be tied up. There's very few, unless I'm running a tank and I've got like 4 or 5 or 6 Leman Russes and 7 of them are equipped with heavy flamers and they're kind of doing the screening, then I don't want them getting tied up. And infantry is really important for that. Now 60 is the core. I want to come back to this whole thing. I'm talking about 60 rather than 100. Because again, many of you will be like saying, no, you always say 100. Why are you now saying 60? I've gone out and bought 100. Have I wasted my money? Morning glory, you fucking liar, you piece of... Anyway, my point is, 60 is the minimum, but you will be building on that 60. 60 is where you go, right, I've now got my 60 infantry. I'm either now going to put all of those infantry in chimeras, in which case we're not talking about the core anymore. That's like the second part of your list building. You know, you're adding your theme, you're adding your sort of speciality, USP, your niche, your skew onto your list. So either you're going to put the 60 infantry in chimeras, or you're going to go, well, I'm not taking any more chimeras. I've taken all the vehicles I'm going to take. I now need more screening, more objective play. Right, now I'm going to double it and go from 120 infantry. Okay, so when I say 60 is the core, I'm talking about it's the core before you decide I'm going to go down a mech route, I'm going to go down an armoured route, I'm going to go down an infantry route, I'm going to go down a hybrid route. 60 is your minimum. It's the core. It's the skeleton. So hopefully that's really, really clear, because I don't want there to be any confusion. Hopefully the enemy will be confused. Don't want there to be any confusion for anyone watching these videos. If you're building a hybrid guard list, then you're probably looking at more like 100 infantry minimum. But when you're putting your army together and you're not sure maybe which route you're going to go down yet, aim for 60 and then decide, right, I'm going chimeras or I'm going blah, 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 blah. Anyway, don't repeat myself too much. So that is the second part of the core. I love the core. Every day on the core. No, we're not saying it again. That's the second part of the core. So now you've got firepower. Now you're playing your own secondaries and you're playing the primary game. So you're getting the objectives down and you're screening out firepower. What's the next most important part of the core? The final part of any competitive guard list, the final part that you should be putting into every list that you are building, is you need some indirect fire. Indirect fire is absolutely crucial. I have run many lists where I've not brought any indirect fire, and they have all, without fail, done worse than those lists where I even took just one mortar squad. That's how important indirect fire is. Now, there are ways you can get around indirect fire. Maybe you're silent and you can deep strike around, but we're not going to be talking about that today. That's almost like the exception that proves the rule. We're talking about your standard Imperial Guard, your standard Astra Militarum. Ugh, I hate that name. Standard Astra Militarum list. We're not talking about silence or anything. And we're talking about indirect fire. It's so important. Now, why is it so important? Firstly, 9th edition has a lot of terrain. And we're talking about competitive terrain here. We're not talking about battle bunkers. We're not talking about our mates, going around for some brewskis or anything like that. We're rocking up to at least a one-day tournament, and that tournament organizer has a vague idea of how the hell to run a tournament, how to set up a tournament properly, okay? So the terrain is on point. Now, you're going to find that pretty much any terrain, any board that you go to that's worth a damn, it's going to have some pretty hardcore terrain on it. It's going to be a lot of terrain, and you're not necessarily going to be able to always get the angles you want. Your opponent's going to feed certain units to you. Your opponent's going to let you shoot at certain stuff and not at others. And then if he's doing that, he's dictating the flow. Legions of Martians are great, but they can't see everywhere. They almost shouldn't be able to. It'd be lovely to play Planet Bowling Ball every time, but no. We don't play on that, and so it's almost better for the game master that it's not like that. I have played on light tails before where I've just shot my opponent to death, and it was, I was using crappy 8th edition guard, no buffs, and he was using some of the latest hotness, and I just shot him to death because the TO just basically didn't have any terrain on the board. So it's happened, and likewise I've been on the other end when I've been using my silence. There's not been enough terrain, and I've just been shot off the board. So terrain is really important, and you need indirect fire to counter terrain for two key reasons. Firstly, you want to be able to target your opponent's units that he's going to try and use to get the drop on you. So think of things like Sanguinary Guard. Sanguinary Guard are kind of hot at the moment because they've got 2+ save, they've got armor content, they've got all this good stuff, and they would like to jump from cover to cover, and then they finally get close to you, and then they jump out and they wreck all your stuff, and then it's really, really bad. That's a typical example of a sort of an aggressive unit and your opponent being able to use the terrain to hop them up the board and get to you, right? You need to be able to neutralise that threat, or at the very least soften it up before it gets to you. And you might not be able to do that if you don't have some artillery. So firstly, it's to counter your opponent's island hopping, terrain hopping, whatever you want to call it, aggressive units. Secondly, you might be in a situation where your opponent wants to hold. There's 3 reasons. Typical Morning Glory, you can't count. There's 3 reasons. The second reason is kind of similar to the first one, but it's less about being aggressive. There might be a middle objective, and your opponent wants to hold that objective. And there's terrain in the middle that allows him to hide his units in there, and then he just sits there comfortably, and because you don't have any combat or you don't want to get your tanks tied up, you can't really get to the units without risking your own units. And so what happens is you can't really get to grips with them. Your opponent sits in the middle of the game and he wins on points. It's really, really frustrating. If you've got indirect fire, he can't just sit there, because you're just going to sit there and you're just going to blow him up, and then you're going to move in, he's going to lose half his armies, then he has to try and charge across some potentially open ground. It's just not good for him. So indirect fire, again, your opponent isn't getting to hop from terrain, your opponent isn't getting to dictate the flow of the battlefield, your opponent isn't making life hard for you, you are making life hard for your opponent. I don't mean by being like an arsehole on the table, I mean by, unit choices. The third thing, and this kind of links to the second one, is one of the most common things you will see in a lot of competitive lists is someone holds their backfield objective, the objective that's in their deployment zone. There's always one objective in deployment zone, right? At least one, right? And they hold that objective or 2 objectives with a really basic squad. Maybe it's 5 intercessors. 5 intercessors, the quintessential basic bitch objective holding unit. Now, if you've got no way of interacting with that intercessor unit, it's going to sit there and score your opponent points every single game. And it's going to be really, really annoying, because if you just had a Basilisk, you just had a Manticore, you just had something that can shoot it and kill it, then your opponent not only loses an objective, but he starts losing forward momentum as well, because either he's got to reroute something to hold his back objective, or he starts losing points. Now, he might go all in and start attacking you more. That is possible, but it's more than likely your opponent is going to be like, right, crap, I've got to move this squad of Assault Marine. No one takes Assault Marines. That was a terrible example. I've got to move this other unit back. Now I don't have quite the momentum that I wanted to have. And so there's 2 ways of engaging an army. There's engaging it head on, and then there's almost like forcing it to engage in different areas as well. It's really, really powerful. If you can draw your opponent's units away from his front line, from his death ball, you're having a great time. And again, he's not dictating the flow of the battle. You are dictating the flow of the battle. To be honest, that last reason is almost the main thing. If you don't have that much indirect fire, just make sure you take at least 1 decent heavy hitter that you can just sit there and just launch shells, launch rockets, launch whatever it is, just so you know that you'll be constantly pecking away at that opponent's backfield objective. Now, in order to talk about like specific indirect fire units, you want to be looking initially at some like heavy hitters. This is either going to be sort of full pillar Manticores or full pillar Basilisks. That's kind of where you want to go first, and then you want to add on your supplementary firepower, which might be something like a mortar pit. The reason I go for the heavy hitters first is because, like I said, you really want to be making sure that you can threaten this backfield objective. A bunch of mortars firing away an enemy unit like an intercessor that out at the back, you might not pick them up for multiple turns because they've got a 2-up save against your mortars if they're in cover. A Basilisk quickly, maybe 2 of them will quickly, in a turn or 2, pick that squad of Marines up. So that's why I'd say when it comes to direct fire, take 2 heavy hitters first and then add in things like the mortar pit and the other supplementary lighter indirect fire. But it's all pretty good, and that's more of a guide rather than a hard and fast rule. Just take some indirect fire, whatever it might be. So that really covers almost the specific competitive core that's been going into every single one of my lists recently. Now, I've also got one more thing I want to talk about. It's almost like an honourable mention, shall we say, and that is officers. You're definitely going to want a couple of officers as well. Minimum that you want to be looking at is at least a couple of platoon commanders in almost any list that you're putting together. And if you actually add that up, if you look at 3 tank commanders, 2 platoon commanders, 60 infantry, and a couple of basilisks, you're looking at about 1,200, 1,250 points, which leaves you with about 750 points to really sort of theme your list out. But like I said, I wanted to give an honourable mention to the officers because the Guard without its orders is just a mediocre army. Orders are just so important, and it's one of those things that have allowed us, even though we've not had a codex for years, to be able to still maintain a decent win rate if we pull out all of our tricks and all of our tools in the toolbox. It's thanks to orders, really. They're such a strong core mechanic of the Guard, so I wanted to give an honourable mention to our officer core. And that's it, guys. So that's what I use as my competitive core for pretty much any list that I build. Now, what I'd be really interested to know is what you guys use for a competitive core. Put it down in the comment section below. Do you agree with what I'm taking? Do you disagree? Am I missing some tricks? Is it like Morning Glory, I cannot believe you're not taking Weird Vein Psychic because they're utterly broken and OP. If that is the case, then clearly I need to wake up first. But joking aside, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Am I on the right track? Am I not? This is just what's worked for me. Your mileage may vary. So any core unit that you don't build a list without putting this thing in there. Put it down in the comment section below. Give us a little bit of description. Share that knowledge with your fellow guard commanders. Now, if you have enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate if you would consider giving it the old like and the old subscribe. I know, shilling out for likes and subscribe, Morning Glory, how far you've fallen. But I would really appreciate a like and subscribe, boys. It would mean so much to me. And if you've really enjoyed the video and you want to go the extra mile and support the Morning Glory channel, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter today. It truly is thanks to the channel members and the Patreon supporters that the Morning Glory channel is still around. It sounds cheesy, but I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for them. So massive thank you to all of my channel members and Patreon supporters. And I want to take a moment now to say some shout outs for our latest channel members and Patreon supporters. So massive thank you to John Stubbs, Tom from Discord, Yao Grimnar, Gangastani and Colonel Haberstern for being channel members. Thank you for doing your part. To everyone else, would you like to know more? Click the join button down below. It's next to the red subscribe button on this video. Join up and do your part for Emperor and Imperium today. And also a big thank you to our latest Patreon supporters, Timber de Jägermeister, Jesse Cashman and Nicholas Walsh. And I want to say a special thank you to Nick because he's signed up at the Lord General level. That is the top tier of Patreon support. Massive thank you, man. It means a huge amount. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of our other top tier Patreon supporters, the guys that really are making a huge impact on the Morning Glory channel. So thank you to August Varney, thank you to John Stubbs, Swordfish Trombone, and Diesel Fox and Shooter McGavin. Absolutely incredible. You guys are going to get a personal thank you every single video because you're on those top tier level of support. It's unbelievable. So thank you so much. And a couple of honourable mentions on the Patreon front. I want to say thank you to Stephen Hearn and to Josh Durr for increasing their amounts. Absolutely fantastic, boys. Really appreciate that you think I'm doing a good job and so you've upped your Patreon support. It's incredible and it's just humbling overall. So just thank you so much, everyone. Anyway, boys, before I burst into tears and get all gushy and mushy on you, which I know you guys, it'd make me as uncomfortable, make you guys uncomfortable, I just want to say a huge thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.